Thank you.
Okay, well,
When you come to Ukraine, when you come to Ukraine.
when am I coming?
Yes, when you come to Ukraine.
How about next week?
Next week?
The answer to the earlier part of that question is yes. Of course the Ukrainians are going to be at the table. I mean, who would be foolish to say they wouldn't? But when you say at the table, you have to define it. One of the things I'm driving towards is we've had a good, remember this war has been going on now, we're heading into the third year. One of the things we haven't really gotten to is specifics. What does it really look like? And we talk a lot about it, and I will criticize, and I know I'm being very, very, political when I say this. President Trump inherited this war right now, but our philosophy is not to continue this war to the death of every last Ukrainian. The intent is to stop the carnage, stop the war, make sure it's reasonable, making sure the sovereignty stays intact. But we're going to get to specifics about it. When you say sitting at the table, in all probability, there's really going to be, one of the reasons I'm here is for the input, obviously. But when you sit at the table, there's two protagonists when you look at it, and there's one, hopefully, the intermediary.
Okay, who's the protagonist and who's the intermediary?
Well, I'm saying is notice I'm being very diplomatic about it. I got my diplomatic hat, my passport in my pocket. The fact is we're looking at, you can have the Ukrainians, the Russians, and clearly the Americans at the table talking, but we've got to have specifics to get to a point. President Trump has been very, very clear. He said this on the very first time he went to the United Nations and the UN General Assembly, and he talked about, if you go back and you look at his talk, he talked about the importance of national sovereignty. Look at his speech. And he said, if you fight for your sovereignty, we will be with you. And he has said that, and he's never abandoned that. So what we've got to figure out is what does this look like? And that's where we're in the process. It's been so easy to sit there and make it a cottage industry of talking about solutions. What we want to have is stable environment, we want to have secure borders, we want to whatever it's going to be. But I'm driving towards very, very specific, very, very hard data that we can say this is what it looks like. And then it's going to be up to the two belligerents that are fighting each other right now, the Ukrainians and the Russians. Is this acceptable? But there's no way, nobody would ever exclude, and nobody's even said that. I would challenge anybody in this room, or anybody in the audience, to say, when have we ever said that the Ukrainians would be excluded from any discussion? It's never been said. President Trump's been very open about that. Two calls made immediately, one to Putin, one to Zelensky. Talking with the Vice President yesterday. My going into Ukraine this week. When you look at what happened in the last 2 years, I'm going to be very, very critical now of the United States. President Biden had not talked to Putin in 2 years. Rick described it's been 3 years. Okay, the fact is you can't do that. The fact is you have to have people talking, whether you like it or not. I remember I worked for a guy named Secretary of Defense Mattis at one time, and he said about an adversary, I really hate the son of a bitch, but I got to talk to him, okay? And it's kind of the same way. So we're going to get to a position where we can come out of this and ensure the sovereignty, the security of Ukraine, and actually achieve goals that we're not going to see a Minsk 1. We're not going to see a Minsk 2. You're not going to get there. This has got to be a stable, long-term environment, and we don't want to be started again. Now, I'll close with saying this, but here's what you need to understand and really take it. A ceasefire or long-term peace agreement isn't going to be the real determinant of success. The real determinant of success will be the first time a ceasefire is broken. Then how do the national leaders of all these countries respond? Do you respond by saying, that happens? As President Biden said on television, a national audience, a quote, minimal intervention by the Russians in Ukraine may be okay. He said that. His definition of minimal incursion for the Russians is significantly different than my minimal incursion.
Putin does not appear to be interested in a ceasefire. It seems to me that one could argue that President Trump is more interested in a ceasefire than President Putin right now. And the urgency is coming from the US side. Is there a risk, frankly and plainly spoken, of a sellout to President Putin from a president of the United States who wants to get an agreement fast so that he can say he has got this agreement?
No, because I think the comment's absurd. I mean, President Trump is not going to sell it. I think what it goes back to what we said before is I think you have to look at it in stages. You go to the intermediate stage, which is ceasefire looped into a full plan, or go to a review plan. I think that's part of the discussion that you want to get to. And that's what I talked about earlier when it's a comment is, we're at a level in this war, the world. You're at a level that is World War II level of violence. It's institutional level of violence. So the question is, okay, I always got the feeling, and I know it's a harsh assessment, that the policy and the strategy of the United States before was, we're going to keep funding Ukraine to the death of every last Ukrainian soldier. It's okay. No, that's wrong. Somebody who's served and fought, is you look and say, look, I understand what they're going through out there, and what you want to do is at least stop the killing, reset, rearm, refit, whatever you want to call it. But no, it's not an expediency level. It's the idea that how do you build? But the first thing you're going to get to is you have to define the term. And when you look at what does stable security arrangement look like? And I think that's when you get to that point that you get there. But I said, if you say that, get to it. What you said, he wants to get to a ceasefire as fast as you can. That means we don't care what one of the parties talks about. We've always said before that Ukraine is obviously a party of the conflict. And the Ukrainians are obviously part of that decision. They have to be part of that decision. They're the ones fighting and dying on the battlefield. You were looking at the dangers that we face of an expanding war that we hadn't seen before because of the simple alliances that we are seeing. The alliance in the Middle East with Iran, the alliance in the Far East with China, the alliance in the Far East with North Korea, and you've got Russia proper, something we had not seen 4 years ago. So it's a different environment. So we understand that. And as I said, we are looking at this on a very strategic level, not a tactical level, but a very strategic level of what does this look like in, not just for Europe, but this is a global issue. And the president said that this is not, you cannot restrict this conflict intellectually to just Europe. You have to think about this. This is a global fight. And if you don't think it's a global fight, you're wrong. Example, it's really simple. Who's buying levels of oil and gas from Russia right now? Not just the European Union, but you look at a country like India. India's increased their buy from the Russians from 11% to 40%. Okay, so you kind of look and say, okay, everybody's in this thing. You think about it. Remember, members of the European Union laughed at President Trump when he said you need to shut down Nord Stream. You all remember that? That he cautioned you about buying Russian gas and oil because he knew where the money was going. Okay? So you think about that and we are looking at this at a level that has not been looked at before, which is a geostrategic level that we think is important for global security. So I think we're on the right path, and we want to have it, and that's the reason why, one of the reasons I'm here, one of the reasons I'm at the Munich Security Conference, one of the reasons we're talking to allies, is to sit down and say, all right, and honestly, what are you thinking? And let me just close with this, because I made this comment before, and unfortunately most of my team isn't here because they've heard it so many times. But it's like, people would come into a room with a really ugly dog, and what diplomats will say, that's an unusual animal, can you tell me about it? Okay, we've reached the point when somebody comes in and said, that's an ugly dog, and how do we fix it? We now want absolute surety, we want commitment, we want honesty, and we want to develop a plan that is going to be long-term, not it feels good because the diplomats, this is how we do it. But we're looking for ground truth and solving this right now.
Well, thank you, General, for your